some slugs and snails to cook in the fire. Li Shu started to have doubts about whether they should continue moving forward or not. There were just way too many unknown and unpredictable variables. Their worries were forced into the back seat as barbecue started chirping like a security alarm. The duo quickly armed themselves and saw two hooded figures heading into their position. The hooded duo just continued running in, not even acknowledging their presence. Behind them, a feral stray cat was in hunting mode. So, Su Xiao and Li Shui were roped into another massive problem by strangers. The feral cat snarled at the group, and Su Xiao gave a subtle signal to Li Shui. She stretched her bowstring, and he warned the strangers to hold their breath. Her target was the abnormal fungal growth on the side. It swiftly exploded, proliferating spores all around the can. It was pretty effective in making the feral cat struggle. But despite inhaling copious amounts of the mysterious spores, the stray still had enough presence of mind to attack. Thankfully, Su Xiao moved fast enough to land a kick on its face. He was dropped to the ground in return, trapped by the cat's paw, its claws digging through his chest. When Li Jue tried to help him out, she too got wounded, a nasty scratch to the back. At least Su Xiao had broken free from the paw trap to try and rescue the falling landlady, but the cat's erratic movements threw him off the can. It had gotten so chaotic that he was almost flattened by their emergency shelter. Just as he thought he was safe, he saw the cat's paw coming down on his head. He managed to dodge in the nick of time, but being hunted like this was exhausting. Su Xiao was severely injured, her back bleeding from the open scratch wound. The cat had already lost interest in the tiny humans. Li Shui needed to get treated as soon as possible. The strangers were tasked with gathering dry firewood while Su Xiao kept his partner warm in his arms. They boiled some water and remade the camp. The strangers introduced themselves as Zhang Fang and Qian Xin. Zhang Fang handed Su Xiao some plant ash to help stifle his partner's bleeding. As soon as Li Shui threw her torch into the lumps, they started bursting open and spreading crimson powder spores. Just like him, Barbecue was very concerned about Li Shui too. Thankfully, the old no-nonsense Li Shui was back. She scolded her teammate for hugging her and instructed him not to let her back touch the ground. There were some sewing needles left in their backpack. They could use hair scalded in boiling water as threads to suture the wound. All he had to do was help her close the two sides of the back wound together and let the mysterious healing power take care of the rest. For someone with no sewing skills, Su Xiao did a pretty good job with the whole process. Near the campfire, that dude named Qian Xin was doubtful that such a method would work. Su Xiao cleaned the wound and warned Li Shui that the next step would hurt like a bitch. She gritted her teeth through the pain as Su Xiao carefully closed the wound. It took a while to finish the stitches, long enough that the bonfire ran out of fire. Su Xiao was absolutely exhausted, but he started worrying when Li Shui wasn't responding to his calls anymore. But she was still breathing, and her fever had gone down. She had just passed out. Now it was time for Su Xiao to deal with his severe own wound. His solution was to get some dirt and cram it into his chest wound. He bandaged himself up and went to bed beside Li Shui. It was only fair that the stranger duo should stand guard for the night. But just to be sure, Su Xiao secretly tasked Barbecue with keeping an eye on their guests. Qian Xin admitted that the duo was badass, but with their injuries, recovering would be tough. They could just take all their good stuff like the paperclip bow and food supplies. Zhang Feng resented that idea. Qian Xin refused to take responsibility for luring the cat to this place, claiming they had no other choice. He just didn't want to waste such good stuff when it was within arm's reach. Once it was his turn to stand guard while everyone else slept, Qian Xin immediately enacted his robbery, even kicking Barbecue away in the process as the baby lizard tried to stop him. Then, the bastard took a toothpick arrow, loaded it into the bow, and aimed it towards Barbecue. That was when Li Shui woke up. Her voice freaked out Qian Xin, and the fool's hand slipped, releasing the arrow right into the sleeping Su Xiao. Fortunately, Li Shui had superhuman reflexes and caught the toothpick in midair. Qian Xin tried to weasel his way out of his shenanigans, and she choked him out in response. Based on her superhuman strength, no one would think that she was heavily wounded the day before. Zhang Feng woke up from the noise of the commotion and ran towards Qian Xin's side. Su Xiao's rest was also disturbed by the noise of fighting. He was more interested in Li Shui's recovery than anything else. This proved that they really had some extraordinary regenerative ability. The sin of taking their stuff in the middle of the night was grave. But when Barbecue told him that the bastard hit him, Su Xiao's tone shifted grimly. That bushy-brow, saucer-eyed prick really tried to steal their stuff and bully their friend. Qian Xin stumbled over his words, insisting that he was just trying out the bow and arrows. Su Xiao just wanted to intimidate the guy. Lisa was surprised that Su Xiao could understand what Barbecue said. That's because the little guy was getting smarter every day. Stepping out of the darkness, a new day awaited in a flooded forest of tall grass. At this point, hunting a beetle was no problem at all. It turned out that these strangers were also headed for the light. The flood wouldn't settle for another hour and a half, but they needed to get going. Zhangfang tried to offer some beetle meat to the hateful Chen Xin, but the prick harshly rejected it. He wanted to make a stand and refused to take something hunted by the jacket duo, but his stomach growl betrayed his words. After having their fill, Li Zui took charge of moving away from the flooded area. Chen Xin, the coward, opposed the idea of using grass as a pathway, afraid of falling into the water. Zhangfang had no qualms about leaving his ass to join the powerhouse duo. Afraid and alone inside the can, Chen Xin swallowed his pride and followed suit. More people mean more trouble, but they could manage, right? Moreover, Su Xiao just found an excellent find, a piece of styrofoam floating in the water. After making sure that it was safe, everyone boarded their new boat. The healing process for their wounds consumed a lot of energy, so they'd need to find some decent food on the shore. Su Xiao decided to climb back up to the stalks upon seeing some insects lurking around. He found a group of aphids. They could eat these plainly or sip their fragrant honeydew. He brought down a whole bag of these aphids, but his descent to the boat was interrupted by another praying mantis attack. With the help of Li Xue's cover fire, he made quick work of neutralizing and dropping the attacker into the water. Su Xiao assured his partner that it was all good, but there were some wriggly black worms moving behind him. These creepy things constricting him were horsehair worms. They were coming out of the dead mantis's body, seemingly trying to take over Su Xiao instead. Li Ji went to the rescue, cutting down the critters with the beetle knife. Seeing that there were more worms in the water, Chen Xin started panicking again and began rowing without waiting for the powerhouse duo. The bastard was so selfish that he tried to shove Zhang Fang into the water for trying to stop him. Su Xiao managed to respond in time, catching the lady. Li Xu also jumped into the boat and immediately put the useless punk in a chokehold, threatening to drop him into the worm-infested water. In the end, they still spared the bastard, but made him their designated rower. Su Xiao busted out the aphids that he harvested to share the weird, sweet treat. When the ladies tried it, they couldn't believe how sweet the aphid essence was. Su Xiao neglected to tell them that they were sucking on poop. That certainly ruined the sweet treat. But he insisted that aphid poop is safe to eat as their diet consists solely of plant sap. Su Xiao noticed that they were going a little too fast, and it wasn't because of Chen Xin's rowing. The water itself was dragging the boat away. This could only mean one thing. They were headed for a waterfall up ahead. Seeing the steep drop ahead, Chen Xin immediately started telling them that the group should have listened to him and waited for the water to dry. But it's too late now. Li Xu planned to jump on the grass ahead and cut it so everyone could hang on. Her movements were fast and masterful, scaling the grass stalk with ease while holding a knife. Upon reaching the halfway point, she started sawing off the stalk's body. The other survivors were beginning to panic, but Su Xiao just told them to trust the landlady. The grass stalk was finally cut down, and he led the other two towards the tip. They all managed to jump in time, letting the boat go down the fall. Chen Xin started trying to discourage Zhang Fang from joining these two superhumans again, but she had a brain, and the logical choice was to stick with strong allies. Su Xiao couldn't stop snacking on the aphids in his bag. He was starting to notice that there was something special about them. He and Barbecue continued their binge. Su Xiao presented the idea of cutting more stalks to make a bridge, but transferring from one blade to another would be impossible. That's when Su Xiao's eyes started glowing with a green hue, and something inside him began to change and grow. An untold strength started coursing through his veins. The aphid poop made him feel like he could fly. He grabbed the cut-down stalk that saved them from the fall and started lifting it back into place. This mysterious boost in his strength was the perfect tool to go with his plan. Just a single jump was enough for him to reach the next stalk from afar. Su Xiao immediately started crafting the grass bridge. As the rest of the gang crossed, he was feeling so good that he might even be able to kill a gigantic cow. Scratch that. Maybe just a chicken. Speaking of chickens, a bird just came down from the skies, mistaking them for prey and got its talons broken. Su Xiao bashed the bird from left to right, teaching it a lesson. With the bird neutralized, he started craving grilled wings for lunch. He might be hyped, but Li Jue was getting a little concerned at this sudden boost in strength. She was worried that this aphid poop augmentation could have some side effects. Just as Su Xiao was about to assure her that everything was fine, his face contorted into a crazy grimace, and he proceeded to pass out cold. Su Xiao woke up after Barbecue dropped a few more drops of aphid poop in his mouth. With humans shrinking down, maybe other creatures were also affected in some way, like these aphids. He cataloged this phenomenon and labeled the snacks he was sipping on as violent aphids. There was also the parasitic mushroom, or Little Red Riding Hood. While they were resting, Zhang Fang suggested the possibility of hitting a bigger road for safety, but they couldn't afford to take the long way. Besides, going on the big roads would leave them exposed to feral cats and dogs. They needed to stay on course and adapt to whatever came. Chen Xin hated everything about their situation, and he believed that reaching the light would bring them back to the normal world. Su Xiao certainly hoped that it could be that simple, but just taking a glance at the light from far away made him hear all kinds of seductive voices calling him in. They needed to cross the river, and the injured bird was trying to sneak out while they were planning how to do so. With the bird's wings broken, it was nothing more than a living meat supply. To cross the rest of the river, they would need to rely on Su Xiao's aphid-fortified strength. He estimated that his limit would be around 2 minutes, but that should be plenty to build a stock bridge. Su Xiao delivered. He was fast and efficient. All that was left to do was connect the cut-down stalks together. The bridge was swiftly finished, and he beckoned the group to walk through it. Unfortunately, the aphid side effect kicked in before Su Xiao could reach the ground on the other side. He collapsed, and his body started falling into the water. Li Shi tried her best to rescue her partner, but she was too late. Fortunately, Su Xiao had learned to be cautious over the past few days and tied his waist around the bridge. Verifying that the bridge was safe, the injured sparrow was next up on the line to cross. Xianxin and Zhang Fang had to poke the bird with a stick to force it to cross the stalks. Upon reaching the other side, Li Shui tried to tame the sparrow, but it was too arrogant. She had no time to waste taking it easy, so she beat the poor bird into submission. They used the injured sparrow as a mount the rest of the way. It might not be able to fly, but it could still run. When Su Xiao came around, he was situated below Li Shui's body. It wasn't the worst position to be in after a poopy side effect. He was out for so long that the dark was starting to set in. Their camp for tonight would be the big tree up ahead. On the way to the next resting area, Qianxin started suffering an unbearable itch on his back. There were some nasty marks protruding from his skin. The team reached the big tree without any more trouble. When Barbecue and the sparrow had the chance to interact properly on land, the bird started attacking the lizard immediately. Barbecue was confused at first, but brought out his baby claws afterward. That sparrow saved the group a lot of time and effort by acting as a mule. Unfortunately, it wasn't as smart as Barbecue. We didn't see how the fight between the pets went down, but the only thing you need to know is that the bird was traumatized. To make matters worse, the powerhouse duo thought that the sparrow was the bully. Tonight, aphid husks were on the menu for dinner. They only had 4 loaded aphid honeydew poops, but Su Xiao intended to gather some more. Xianxin finally brought up the itch on his back, which had been a bother. He wouldn't be able to sleep anyway, so he wanted to take the first watch shift. The guy had proven that he was unreliable when it mattered, so Barbecue was tasked to stay up as well. Throughout the night, all the prick did was scratch his back vigorously. Then he just stopped and slowly made his way towards the direction of the powerhouse duo. It was past midnight, and Su Xiao had just woken up to start his watch shift. Leaky must have sensed something hostile closing in and woke up to raise her toothpick spear. Once they got a good look at the bastard's face, his eyes were moving erratically and his body was convulsing bizarrely. Su Xiao asked Qianxin what was going on, but the punk just roared and charged at him. It only took a single kick to repel his charge. Whatever was happening, they should tie up the fool first. After finishing the bindings, Qianxin started wriggling on the floor in agony. He just felt an unbearable itch spreading all over his body. Su Xiao decided to turn the captive around and check on Qianxin's back, where signs of fungal growth were starting to fester. If he wasn't mistaken, this was the parasitic little Red Riding Hood fungi. If that's the case, Zhang Fang might be infected as well. Su Xiao tried to wake her up, but it might be a little too late. She was suffering the symptoms already. They might have been parasitized in the feral cat encounter. They must have inhaled a small number of spores, but the powerhouse duo was fine, and they were the ones that were exposed to more spores. If the mushroom's growth depends on the host's health, then maybe a burst of potential from the violent aphids would alleviate the fungal growth. It's also possible that the parasite would just absorb the aphid's potency. Nevertheless, it was too late for that prick, Qianxin. His whole backside burst open, spawning a whole bunch of fungal parasites. If they didn't want Zhang Fang to suffer the same brutal fate, then they needed to hurry up with the aphid plan. She was in agony, but when presented with a difficult choice, Zhang Fang chose to take her chance with the aphid essence. As soon as the poop drops were absorbed into her body, a qualitative change occurred inside her. Before Su Xiao could react, the augmented Zhang Fang was already clutching his neck with incredible grip strength. He tried to reason with her, but there were simply no thoughts behind those glowing green eyes. Zhang Fang went ahead and tried to bite him in the neck. She would have taken a decent chunk if it wasn't for Li Jue dragging her away by the hair. While the powerhouse duo was bickering, Zhang Fang grabbed Su Xiao and threw him to his partner. The throw was so strong that the impact nearly shattered the ground. She was even more potent than Su Xiao under the aphid enhancement. But since she was infected by the fungi, she should be weak enough to fire too, right? Knowing her weakness was useless if they didn't find a way to stop her onslaught first. Luckily, Su Xiao was blasted off near the campfire and immediately went straight for the flames. He waved a torch around and she backed off. He was confident that he found the answer, but Zhang Fang simply tapped the torch away from his hand. With no more ideas left, Su Xiao kneeled and tried to redirect zombie Zhang Fang's attention to the sparrow and its delicious meat. But her target was Su Xiao, and even a sneaky toothpick arrow coming from behind wouldn't stop her. It was as if she had ultra instinct, catching the incoming attack with her bare hands. Then she used the arrow that she had caught to attack Su Xiao. He wanted to do the same thing and grab the toothpick too. He managed to do that, but the force behind the throw was so powerful that it swept him off his feet. For a moment, it looked like the powerhouse duo was really done for. Su Xiao could only hope that Barbecue would be smart enough to run away. That's when a sudden explosion of black dust interrupted the attack. As soon as the dust settled, a pair of glowing eyes made themselves known. It was a massive red lizard, and it was directing its hostility towards Zombie Zhangfeng. The duo had no idea what this thing was, but it was fast and strong enough to keep up with the supercharged zombie. They needed to take this chance to get to safety. The lizard had the upper hand, pushing the zombie to desperation. When Zhangfeng tried to attack its body, the beast responded with a tail whip. Then he ferociously charged only to get all momentum sapped out upon tanking a kick. The second kick was a critical strike to the side. These two supernatural creatures were at a standoff, and Zombie Zhangfeng broke it off by running away. She blended into the darkness of the night and went off to God knows where. Mr. Red Lizard looked around, but wasn't able to keep up. Meanwhile, the duo got as far away as they could. They were far enough to rest up and tend to their severe injuries, but with their extraordinary physique, recovery shouldn't be a problem. Their only concern was the missing Barbecue. Unbeknownst to the duo, a pair of predatory reptilian eyes were lurking in the background. Su Xiao surveyed the area and heard some rustling. He went to check it out, hoping it was Barbecue. Unfortunately for him, it was a different reptile, another snake hunting for prey. Li Shui reacted as soon as she saw the predator near her partner. She grabbed him by the hand and started running again. There were a few close calls, but Su Xiao kept dodging certain death by a hair's breadth. When it got close enough to land a surefire blow, the red lizard from earlier made its appearance and thwarted the snake's attempt to have some human dinner. Instead of getting a bite out of shrunken humans, the snake suffered a painful chomp to the body. The red lizard was tough and scrappy, biting the snake into submission. He finished the fight by making a knot out of the poor snake's body. Then, the red lizard started suffering from the same side effects that Su Xiao had with violent aphid consumption. Coincidentally, Barbecue's chirping became audible. When the duo checked out the source, they found the baby lizard passed out in an open clearing. The little fella wasn't moving at all, which worried the duo. Lishu thought Barbecue just passed out from fear. But we know better than that, right? They couldn't help but praise the strength of that red lizard that tied the snake up like a bow. With that taken care of, they needed to pack up and check if the sparrow was still alive. Thankfully, the bird was still tied up in the base camp, along with all the supplies. Seeing their transport vehicle alive was relieving. But the little birdie looked like he saw a ghost upon seeing Barbecue. The sparrow knew that Barbecue and the red lizard were one and the same. He wouldn't dare pick a fight against that cute baby reptile again. Thankfully, all the equipment was accounted for, even the violent aphid supplies. They made a bridle for the bird to make the journey smoother. It wasn't even acting up at this point. Su Xiao rode on the back of the bird and made himself comfortable behind Li Shui. She had to put all their stuff in the middle to prevent our boy from getting too close. As soon as they exited the area, Zombie Zhangfeng stepped out of the shadows. Meanwhile, a different group of shrunken survivors came across the Red Riding Hood growth from the camp. It sounded like this group had been actively searching for Su Xiao and the gang for their high potential. In their quest to find the powerhouse duo, they would need to deal with the supercharged parasitized zombie known as Zhang Fang. This group wasn't made up of scrubs. They managed to guard against a perfect sneak attack. Still, the supercharged zombie was just too strong and fast. The group's answer was to bust out the makeshift flamethrower. Zhang Fang was caught off guard and succumbed to the flames immediately. The leader of the group wasn't bothered by the attack. He just wanted to catch up to their real objective. Once they started lowering their guard, something shifted. Zombie Zhangfeng was resilient enough to tank the fire and close the distance to wreck the flamethrower. After destroying the weapon, she targeted the man it was strapped to. Much to her surprise, her flawless movement was stopped by a heavy swing of a blade. The group's leader managed to react faster than she could move, saving his subordinate. This opened the opportunity to gang up against the infected lady. She used the momentum of dodging the attack to propel herself backward. Her aim was to control the plentiful bloom of the Red Riding Hood that Qianqin's body left behind. The zombie didn't even touch the fungal growth, and its red lumps started detonating one after the other. It dispersed the crimson spores into the air. Zhangfeng used this as a highly effective cover while she ran away. The group managed to cover their mouths and noses in time. Their scout noticed that the zombie lady had the same smell as the spores. The leader didn't want to chase. Their time would be better spent going after their actual target. Mr. Scout was confident that tracking down that duo wouldn't be a problem. Using the sparrow as a proper landlocked mount, our duo's progress was relatively fast. Liash decided to halt their push as she spotted a tripwire trap, indicating someone must be camping ahead. As usual, Su Xiao was tasked with going out in the open to greet the strangers as cheerfully as he could. The straw-wearing men were quick to draw their weapons. They were cautious. Su Xiao assured them that he meant no harm and was just wondering if they could share camps for a bit. The older gentleman asked Su Xiao how he bypassed the tripwires they set up. Well, he's been a victim of one, and his partner is an expert in setting them up. Seeing that the strawmen were willing to cooperate, Su Xiao called Li Shui to come out. But she burst out of the bushes due to a hostile force. The group that was hunting them had caught up and now set their sights on Li Shui as well. She warned her partner that these hunters were strong and motivated. They appeared out of nowhere so quickly that Barbecue didn't even have time to give a warning. The older strawman called Wang assured them that he'd take care of the hunters. His idea of dealing with them was sitting down and talking things out first. When the hunters refused peace and attacked instead, Wang just caught the incoming blade with his bare hands covered in scales. The hunter leader didn't like the look of those scales at all, so it was a battle between Wang and the hunter leader. Well, it wasn't really much of a fight. The hunter leader was too fast and vicious. He grabbed Wang by the throat and bit down on the artery with his vampiric fangs. Wang tried to struggle, but every ounce of strength in his body was drained. The scales on his hands disappeared, and the leader threw his limp body away, complaining that it was too greasy. After the bite, the vampire could now coat his skin with scales. He was a vampire who could absorb other people's abilities. And now, his sights were set on making Li Shui his vampire bride. The superhuman duo tried to make their usual sequence of attacks, but defending against them was child's play for the hunter-vampire. The guy didn't even bother with Su Xiao and went straight for the girl. While chaos ensued, Barbecue was hidden in the foliage, trying to squeeze some poop out of the aphids. The duo dealt with the other two hunters easily, but the leader was a different beast. He dragged Su Xiao near Li Shui to make him witness how she'd be sucked dry of everything she had. The vampire made sure that he'd watch every second of this villainy. Even if he wanted to act, there was nothing he could realistically do at that point. The vampire's sanguine feast was interrupted by the appearance of the Crimson Lizard, Barbecue's augmented form. He knew that he needed to take this fight seriously if he were to survive. Impatiently, the vampire charged first and found himself promptly put in his place, the dirt. He refused to yield to a mere beast, but he found himself unable to lift his head. Barbecue looked at his friend in a miserable state and began banging the vampire's head on the floor out of anger. He continued until the seemingly unbeatable enemy succumbed to unconsciousness. Before losing consciousness, Su Xiao finally realized that the red lizard aiding them was Barbecue all along. He awoke once again in the dream world. The enticing voice made him realize his deepest desire: power. Power to protect his companions from harm and suffering. His dream provided an answer to that desire, the white dust floating all around him. This was the solution to his powerlessness. When the white dust touched his hand, it emitted a blinding light and roused him from his slumber. Su Xiao surveyed his surroundings, relieved to find himself still alive. Li Shu fashioned a wooden splint for his broken arm, and it appeared that neither of them was too badly hurt. Currently, the fierce landlady was in the process of interrogating the subdued hunters. Upon awakening, the trio found themselves half dead on the ground, so she bound them. During the interrogation, the duo turned the blade's threat towards the leader. The fool openly admitted that he could extract the blood of exceptional individuals to mimic their abilities. They had been trailing the duo for their first-level physique. The higher the physique level, the greater the rewards for absorption. Presently, the vampire hunter was at level 3. Reaching level 3 afforded him a different perspective of the world. While divulging the information, he slowly burned his restraints. Despite being interrogated, the scoundrel audaciously attempted to sweet-talk Li Shui. As the restraints sufficiently burned away, the vampire swiftly reversed the situation and seized Li Shui by the neck, threatening to crush her windpipe. This time, he anticipated being able to feast to his heart's content. But Su Xiao felt the frustration of his lack of power surging within him, and a mysterious energy began to coalesce in his arm. As the vampire continued boasting about his imminent meal, Su Xiao seized the opportunity to telekinetically control the blade behind him, causing it to rise and stab through the vampire's heart. It was a one-shot, one-kill move that left Su Xiao utterly exhausted. Far away, within the same forest, a meditating old man sensed the energy unleashed by the young man in his moment of crisis. He surmised that someone had just utilized something known as the primary spirit. The old man swiftly descended from his meditation spot, landing as lightly as a feather. A young man addressed him as Grandpa Ni, though he preferred to be called Senior. Grandpa Ni informed the young man that he had a task to complete and would return once it was done. The rest of their group, currently grilling a rat, expressed concern for their safety now that Grandpa Ni was absent. Being a group of individuals with unique abilities, they reassured themselves that they would be fine. Meanwhile, our superhuman duo resumed their recovery efforts. Su Xiao's newly awakened special ability was undeniably linked to the white dust blips he had encountered in the dreamland. He knew that the answers to his myriad questions could only be found within that illuminated room. While trapped in the dreamland, he attempted to control the blips to enter his body, and they complied. This process also manifested itself in the real world. His nose began to bleed and mysterious blips leaked from his head. It took some time, but he managed to absorb every blip in the dreamland. Upon awakening, everything seemed ordinary. Su Xiao felt compelled to meditate as the mist within his body began to move in a specific order, supplementing his recovery. Most of the blips condensed in his brain. While he was preoccupied with exploring the mystery of power, the other hunters regained consciousness and sought revenge. To silence their incessant chatter, Su Xiao opened his eyes and, using his mind, controlled a blade, launching it toward the hunters and stopping it just inches from killing one. The hunters finally retreated in cowardice. Su Xiao could sense that telekinesis was merely a superficial application of the mysterious energy within him. He was convinced that there was more to this ability to contemplate. Perhaps his new ability was even linked to the shrinking incident. Meanwhile, Grandpa Ni flew, surveying the area expertly, tracking the source of the primary spirit. He encountered zombie Zhang Fang and effortlessly dispatched the seemingly unkillable monster with a single thunder ray. It didn't take long for him to locate Su Xiao. Grandpa Ni landed on the ground and closed the distance without moving a muscle, proceeding to trap our boy in an earth prison. The earth swiftly coalesced, encasing the young man in a cage as he attempted to disrupt the formation by wielding a blade. In response, Grandpa Ni summoned a perfectly sculpted dragon head, launching the monolith forward as if it were a real mythical creature. It coiled around Su Xiao, his forceful resistance echoing out. Grandpa Ni was impressed with how the young man handled his attacks. Rarely does one possess such a tacit understanding of the magic of the Imperial Sword. He intended to test Su Xiao, but he nearly lost his life to a flying blade. The old man clarified that he meant no harm. When asked about his identity, Grandpa Ni insisted it wasn't necessary. He came to see the talented individual favored by the Lord. Grandpa Ni, instructed by his god, led the duo to his camp promptly, where they would find answers. Using his flawless magic control, the old man included the duo and barbecue in his flight, showcasing just one of the many uses of the primary spirit. However, Su Xiao's Imperial Sword marked him as a genius. Su Xiao had the potential to become an enlightened spirit, breaking through consciousness boundaries and accepting the full blessing of the primary spirit. The flight didn't last long. Grandpa Ni instructed the team to climb to the second floor, where the Lord awaited. The mysterious building with the light was the camp Grandpa Ni spoke of. Beneath the window lay a mysterious human settlement. Grandpa Ni's mission was complete. His only task was to deliver the gifted Su Xiao. With his purpose fulfilled, Grandpa Ni collapsed to the ground. As the settlers explained, the old man had returned to the origin. The Lord led surviving humans to this place through various methods, but Su Xiao was different. He was special. After ascending to the second floor, they entered a market-like area near the walls. Peddlers of various goods and services flooded them, quickly shooed away by one of the Lord's followers. The follower assured Su Xiao that after meeting the Lord, accommodations and travel would be taken care of, and even Li Shui and Barbecue could tour the place freely. Su Xiao was led toward a massive door, the crowd following, eager for the spectacle. The hooded follower touched the door, and golden electric energy spread around its surface. It creaked open, revealing a warm light. Su Xiao knew he had to enter no matter what. Inside was a sphere of sheer power resembling the sun, surrounded by golden specks of energy akin to the blips in his dreams. The otherworldly voice from his dreamland warmly welcomed him. This sun sphere was the Lord, impressed with Su Xiao's talent and disposition, seeking someone like him for a long time. The golden specks lifted Su Xiao into the air as the Lord promised to reveal the truth, extending a fraction of his sphere body directly into the young man's mind. He saw visions of people praying and devoting themselves to the golden light, piercing the heavens as believers celebrated success, opening the door to the great spirit world, and making Earth their 32nd subworld. When the Lord ascended, the rules of fusion between worlds dramatically changed, resulting in an unstable body in dire need of replacement. A human body proved the most compatible, its consciousness vast despite shrinking in size. The Lord created puppets to search for a special soul, finding Su Xiao, the perfect vessel. This union would make the Lord stronger than ever, fulfilling all future plans. However, as the spherical body of the Lord began assimilating with Su Xiao, the deity panicked, and his godly essence overpowered and absorbed. The deity's followers lined up to witness the events at the sacred site. When the door opened, everyone subconsciously took a step back, overwhelmed by the presence of the young man floating in the air, bathed in golden light. His eyes glowed with a golden hue, his body unmoving. The followers chanted their welcome to their Lord, while Li Shui and Barbecue found themselves in an unexpected situation. The supposed Lord had one question for Li Shui: if she had found a good place to eat, as he was starving.